Simple black woman helped a stranger in a snowstorm, unaware he was a billionaire. The howl of December wind rattled the windows of Fairview Coffee as if begging for entry. Outside, snowflakes the size of quarters had been falling relentlessly since dawn, transforming the city into an apocalyptic winter wasteland. Streets normally bustling with pre-holiday shoppers now lay abandoned under 18 inches of snow, with more accumulating by the hour. Danielle Brooks wiped down the counter for the 10th time that hour, her movements mechanical after 12 years of the same motion. The cloth squeaked against the laminate surface, providing the only sound besides the occasional groan of the ancient heating system fighting valiantly against the bitter cold. Her dark eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the weight of countless early mornings and late nights, of dreams deferred for practicality. "You sure you don't mind closing up?" Sarah, the 19-year-old barista with candy-pink hair asked, already winding a scarf around her neck. "My roommate texted that they're talking about shutting down public transit in an hour." Danielle glanced at the wall clock, 5:38 p.m. Official closing time was 9 o'clock, but who in their right mind would trudge through this weather for coffee? The manager had called earlier, authorizing an early closure at Danielle's discretion. "Go on, get home safe," Danielle said, her voice soft but firm. "Tell Jamie and Marcos they can head out too." Sarah's relief was palpable. "You're literally a lifesaver, Danny. Just doing what needs doing," Danielle replied, the mantra she'd lived by since childhood. After the others left, Danielle stood alone in the unnaturally quiet shop. The radio, usually playing generic coffeehouse jazz, had gone silent when the power flickered an hour ago. The emergency lights cast a strange amber glow across the empty tables. She considered locking up immediately, but something held her back. Maybe it was the howling wind outside, or perhaps the childhood memory of her grandmother insisting that closing the door during a storm was a sacred responsibility. You never knew who might need shelter. 40 minutes later, as she began shutting down the espresso machine, movement caught her eye. A figure appeared outside, stumbling more than walking through the knee-deep snow. Danielle squinted, trying to make out details through the frosted glass. The figure, clearly male, seemed to be fighting against both the wind and his own exhaustion. Danielle hesitated. Company policy was clear: no customers after closing time, especially when alone. But the thermometer outside had dropped to -15, and the man moved with the desperate lurch of someone at the end of their endurance. "Lord help me," she muttered, unlocking the door. The blast of frigid air nearly knocked her backward as the man all but fell inside, bringing with him a swirl of snow and the bitter smell of extreme cold. He wore no hat, no gloves, and his beard contained actual ice crystals. Most strikingly, beneath his inadequate coat, she glimpsed expensive leather shoes, the kind her ex-husband used to covet in department store windows. "Sir? Are you all right?" Danielle asked, helping steady him. The man looked up, his eyes unfocused and alarmingly distant. His skin had the waxy pallor of early hypothermia. He mumbled something inaudible, then seemed to collect himself with visible effort. "Sorry," he managed, his voice cultivated but weak. "Car broke down. Phone dead." Danielle made a quick decision. "Sit by the radiator. I'll get you something warm." She guided him to the table nearest the ancient heating unit, noticing how his expensive shoes left puddles on the linoleum. The man collapsed into the chair, his breathing labored. Up close, she could see his face more clearly, mid-40s, with lines of exhaustion carved deeply around his eyes. Despite his disheveled state, something about his bearing suggested someone used to giving orders, not receiving help. Danielle moved quickly behind the counter. The coffee was already cleaned out, but she filled her personal thermos with hot water and the last chamomile tea bag. She added honey, actual honey, not the cheap syrup provided to customers, from her lunch bag. After a moment's hesitation, she also plated the final blueberry muffin, the one she'd saved for her own dinner. "Drink this slowly," she instructed, placing the thermos and muffin before him. "Small sips." The man looked at the offerings as if they were foreign objects. "I don't have my wallet," he said quietly. "It's on the house." Danielle replied. Or rather, on me. The registers closed. Something flickered across his face, surprise, confusion, or perhaps both. He took the thermos in shaking hands, the steam rising between them like a fragile connection. Thank you, he whispered. The words seemed unfamiliar in his mouth, as though gratitude was a language he rarely practiced. They sat in silence as color gradually returned to his face. Danielle busied herself with final cleanup tasks, giving him space while keeping him in her peripheral vision. Outside, the storm intensified, snow now whipping horizontally past the windows. You have somewhere to go tonight? She finally asked, wrapping her scarf around her neck. The man nodded slowly. Hotel. 6 blocks west. That's the Westerly, Danielle said, frowning. Fancy place to be walking to in this weather. His only response was a non-committal grunt as he finished the tea. When he stood, his movements were steadier, but exhaustion still hung from his shoulders like a physical weight. I've called a rideshare, he said, holding up a phone that must have charged enough from her outlet to function. They'll be here in 3 minutes. Danielle nodded, relief washing through her. The last thing she needed was to worry about a stranger freezing to death after leaving her care. As they waited by the door, the man turned to her, his gaze suddenly sharp and assessing. You didn't have to do this, he said. Danielle shrugged. Wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I turned you away. Most people would have. Then most people need to do better, she replied simply. A black SUV pulled up outside, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow like searchlights. The man moved toward the door, then paused. What's your name? He asked. Danielle. Danielle Brooks. He nodded once, as if committing it to memory, then disappeared into the storm without offering his own name in return. Danielle locked the door behind him, watching until the taillights of the vehicle vanished into the white oblivion. Only then did she realize she'd given away her dinner and would face a long, hungry bus ride home, assuming the buses were still running. Just another day, she sighed, turning off the lights on yet another day of putting others first, unaware that this simple act of kindness would soon upend her entire life. The morning after the blizzard dawned clear and blindingly bright, the sun reflecting off pristine snow like millions of scattered diamonds. Danielle arrived at Fairview Coffee an hour early, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Her apartment's heating had failed overnight, and the cafe, despite its temperamental radiator, promised more warmth than her frost-lined windows. Inside, she found Jamie already wrestling with the espresso machine. His eyebrows shot up when she entered. Damn, Danny, you look like you slept in a freezer, he said, his usual filter absent at this early hour. Close enough, she replied, unwinding her scarf. My building's heat went out. Jamie winced sympathetically. That landlord of yours should be arrested. 3rd time this winter, right? Danielle shrugged off her coat, revealing 3 layers beneath. 4th, but who's counting? She moved toward the back room, eager to change into her work shirt before customers arrived. Anything exciting happen while I was gone? Oh, just the usual post-blizzard chaos. Sarah said you stayed late last night during the worst of it? Someone had to close up, Danielle said, deflecting the unspoken question. Jamie wasn't so easily deterred. Sarah mentioned you might have had a visitor? Said you texted her about some guy who showed up? Danielle paused. The text she'd sent Sarah had been brief, just confirming she'd gotten home safely and mentioning the unexpected guest as an afterthought. She hadn't expected it to become break-room gossip. Just someone who got stranded, she said carefully. His car broke down nearby. Before Jamie could interrogate her further, the front bell chimed. The morning rush had begun. By mid-afternoon, the Frozen Man story had taken on a life of its own. Marcos claimed he'd glimpsed the stranger through the window while catching his rideshare. Looked like a drug addict or something. Sarah insisted he must have been an undercover health inspector, spinning an elaborate theory about corporate surprise audits. Danielle kept quiet, focusing on her work. The stranger's identity mattered less than the fact that he hadn't frozen to death on her conscience. She was restocking napkins when Tori Andrews, The assistant manager cornered her by the supply closet. Tori, barely 26 with an MBA and a chip on her shoulder the size of Texas, had been gunning for Danielle's position as senior staff member since her promotion 6 months ago. "Brooks," she said, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "We need to talk about your unauthorized inventory distribution last night." Danielle blinked. "My what?" "The muffin and tea you gave away," Tori clarified, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "That's theft of company property." The accusation hit like a slap. In 12 years, Danielle had never been accused of anything improper. "It was one muffin that would have been thrown out anyway. And the tea was from my personal stash." "That's not what the logs show," Tori replied, tapping her clipboard. "Last count showed one muffin unaccounted for, and the hot water is still company property." Danielle stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Tori, there was a blizzard. The man was half frozen. Policy is policy. I've already emailed regional about it." Tori's smile was thin and satisfied. "Just doing what needs doing, right? Isn't that your little saying?" The deliberate use of her personal mantra stung more than the accusation itself. Danielle turned away, unwilling to give Tori the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. "You know what, Tori? You're right. Next time someone's dying on our doorstep, I'll be sure to make them pay first." She pushed past the assistant manager, ignoring the startled expression that briefly replaced Tori's smug smile. The afternoon dragged on, customers fewer than usual as the city continued digging out from the storm. Danielle was wiping down tables when she noticed a woman peering through the window, her expensive coat and purposeful gaze marking her as someone who wasn't just seeking shelter from the cold. The woman entered, scanning the cafe as if searching for someone. Her eyes settled on Danielle, and her expression shifted from uncertainty to determination. "Excuse me," she said, approaching Danielle's table. "Would you happen to know if a man was in here last night? During the storm?" Danielle's hand stilled on the table. "May I ask who's inquiring?" "Eliza Winters, from the Philanthropy Times." The woman extended a business card. "I'm following up on something for a story." Danielle accepted the card automatically, unease prickling at her neck. "What kind of story involves a stranger in a coffee shop?" "A potentially interesting one," Eliza replied, her smile practiced. "The man I'm asking about, did he happen to mention his name?" "No," Danielle said truthfully. "And I don't discuss our customers with the press." Eliza's smile flickered but held. "Of course, I understand. But if you do remember anything, please call me." She gestured to the card. "It could be important." After Eliza left, Danielle found herself staring at the business card. The logo was legitimate, but something about the encounter left her unsettled. Why would a journalism publication care about a stranded man in a snowstorm? Her shift was ending when regional manager Denise Park called, requesting a private meeting the following morning. Danielle's stomach dropped, assuming Tori's complaint had escalated faster than expected. As she was gathering her things, Marcos rushed in from his smoke break, eyes wide with excitement. "Danny! You are not going to believe this. The coffee shop's been nominated for some fancy community grant thing." He waved his phone, showing an email forwarded from the corporate. $50,000 and a feature in Business Forward magazine. "What? How?" Danielle asked, bewildered. "Nobody knows. Someone submitted us anonymously." Marcos grinned. "But get this. The nomination specifically mentioned outstanding service during yesterday's blizzard. You're the only one who was here." Behind them, Tori stood frozen in the doorway, her face strained of color as she overheard the conversation. "Marcos," she said, her voice strained. "Who exactly sent that email?" "Corporate forwarded it from the grant committee," he replied, suddenly uncertain under her intense gaze. "Why?" Tori's eyes narrowed as they fixed on Danielle. "Because I think someone's playing a game, and I'd like to know what the rules are." As Danielle left the cafe, the business card heavy in her pocket, and Tori's suspicious glare burning into her back, she couldn't shake the feeling that the simple act of kindness from the night before had set something much larger in motion, something she couldn't control and couldn't predict. And somewhere across the city, in the penthouse suite of the Westerly Hotel, a man stared out at the snow-covered skyline, a half-empty glass of scotch in his hand and Danielle Brooks' name on his mind. Danielle arrived at work the next morning with a knot in her stomach that no amount of herbal tea could unwind. The meeting with regional manager Denise Park loomed at 10 a.m., and she couldn't shake the certainty that her career was about to implode over a single muffin and a cup of hot water. She kept her head down during the morning rush, aware of the whispers that followed her through the cafe. News of the nomination had spread like wildfire, along with increasingly creative theories about her mysterious blizzard visitor. By 9:45, even regular customers were looking at her with newfound curiosity. "I heard he was a secret millionaire," elderly Mrs. Patterson whispered too loudly to her friend as Danielle refilled their cups. "Testing the kindness of strangers, like in those movies." Danielle gave a non-committal smile, escaping to the back just as the bell above the door announced Denise Park's arrival. The regional manager cut an imposing figure, 6 feet tall in Italian leather boots, with the sharp gaze of someone who had clawed her way up the corporate ladder and intended to stay there. "Brooks," she nodded briskly. "Let's use the office." Tori hovered nearby, barely concealing her satisfaction as Danielle followed Denise into the cramped room that served as the cafe's administrative headquarters. To Danielle's surprise, a third woman waited inside, a corporate representative she didn't recognize, wearing a tailored suit that screamed head office. "Ms. Brooks, I'm Vivian Chun, Director of Human Resources," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Danielle's confusion must have shown on her face, because Denise cleared her throat awkwardly. "Danielle, this is not the meeting I originally scheduled," she admitted. "There's been a development. I'm here to discuss an extraordinary opportunity," Vivian interjected smoothly. "One that comes directly from our CEO." Danielle glanced between the two women, certain she was missing something crucial. "Is this about the grant nomination?" "Tangentially," Vivian said, opening a leather portfolio. "But it's much bigger than that. The company is launching a new social equity initiative pilot program, and you've been selected to spearhead it here at Fairview." "Me?" Danielle couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "I'm just a barista. A barista with 12 years of loyal service and exceptional customer care metrics," Vivian corrected. "The program includes a full-time managerial position with a substantial salary increase, comprehensive healthcare, and, most notably, enrollment in our new housing assistance program." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Housing assistance. The words echoed in Danielle's mind like a siren song. After years of battling predatory landlords and failing infrastructure, the idea of stable housing felt almost mythical. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why now?" Denise shifted uncomfortably. "The selection process was unconventional. Your name was specifically requested." "By whom?" "That's confidential," Vivian replied. "But I can tell you that your actions during the blizzard were observed and reported to someone with considerable influence." Danielle's thoughts flashed to the stranger with the expensive shoes, to Eliza Winters and her business card, to the mysterious grant nomination. Pieces of a puzzle were sliding into place, but the picture remained frustratingly unclear. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Of course," Vivian smiled. "Though I should mention that the housing program includes immediate relocation assistance. Given your current situation." The temptation was almost overwhelming. Danielle's apartment would be freezing again tonight, the landlord having promised repairs that never materialized. But something about the offer felt wrong, too sudden, too convenient, tied to strings she couldn't yet see. "I'll let you know tomorrow," she insisted, rising to her feet. Outside the office, she almost collided with Tori, whose poorly concealed eavesdropping was evident from her position near the door. "So," Tori said, arms folded tightly across her chest. "Management track. Must be nice to have friends in high places." "I didn't ask for this, Tori." "Of course you didn't." Tori's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You just happened to help some mysterious stranger during a blizzard, and suddenly corporate is falling over themselves to promote you. Please! Word of the offer spread through the cafe with impossible speed. By afternoon, the atmosphere had transformed from curious whispers to hostile glances. During her break, Danielle overheard Jamie and Marcos in heated conversation by the supply room. I'm telling you, she must have known who he was, Jamie insisted. Why else would she have stayed late? Maybe she slept with him, Marcos suggested. Rich guys love that whole damsel with a heart of gold thing. Danielle's cheeks burned as she backed away silently. The speculation stung more than she wanted to admit. Sarah, at least, seemed genuinely happy for her, though even she couldn't resist asking. So who was he really? Your secret boyfriend? An uncle on the board? He was just someone who needed help, Danielle repeated for what felt like the 100th time. The day crawled by in a fog of confusion and increasingly outlandish rumors. When her shift finally ended, Danielle found 3 more missed calls from Vivian Chin and a text from her landlord announcing that repairs would be delayed another week. As she waited at the bus stop, hunched against the bitter cold, a sleek black car pulled alongside the curb. The window lowered, revealing a woman she'd never seen before. Ms. Brooks? I'm Christina Walsh, from the Tribune, she called out. I'd like to ask you about your connection to Grayson Ellis. Danielle frowned. I don't know anyone by that name. The reporter's eyebrows shot up. You're not aware that Grayson Ellis, the tech billionaire, has named you as the inspiration for his new $40 million community initiative? The ground seemed to shift beneath Danielle's feet. Billionaire? The absurdity of it hit her like a physical blow. The stranger from the blizzard, with his ice-crusted beard and desperate eyes, had been a billionaire? And now he was, what? Rewarding her? Using her? Creating some PR story with her unwitting participation? No comment, she managed, turning away as the bus mercifully approached. That night, in her frigid apartment, Danielle huddled under every blanket she owned, her phone screen illuminating her face as she searched for information on Grayson Ellis. Articles about his tech empire, his recent scandal involving data privacy violations, his subsequent breakdown and disappearance from public life filled her screen. And now, apparently, his mysterious reemergence with a new philanthropic mission, somehow connected to her. Her phone pinged with a notification. An email from Tori, sent to the entire staff. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Attendance mandatory. The subject line read simply, regarding recent developments and allegations of impropriety. Danielle closed her eyes, the pieces finally forming a complete picture, one that threatened everything she had worked for, all because she'd offered a cup of tea to a stranger in a snowstorm. Dawn broke with the soft persistence of a rumor, pale light filtering through Danielle's frost-edged windows. She hadn't slept. Her night had been consumed by research, article after article about Grayson Ellis, tech prodigy turned reclusive billionaire. A man who, until recently, had been more myth than reality to most of the world. The headlines painted a troubling picture. Ellis Technologies CEO disappears after privacy scandal, tech titans breakdown, Ellis vanishes from public eye, where in the world is Grayson Ellis? The man had effectively fallen off the map following a congressional hearing about his company's data harvesting practices. Some speculated a nervous breakdown, others a calculated retreat to avoid further scrutiny. And now, somehow, her name was linked to his. Danielle dressed methodically, as if proper armor might protect her from the day ahead. She arrived at Fairview Coffee 30 minutes before Tori's mandatory meeting, needing the quiet to collect her thoughts. The cafe was eerily silent, chairs still upturned on tables from the night before. Danielle made herself a strong cup of coffee, the familiar ritual providing small comfort. She was midway through her first sip when her phone vibrated with a notification. The headline that appeared on her screen made her coffee slosh dangerously close to the rim. The woman who shared a muffin and changed my life, tech billionaire Grayson Ellis breaks silence. With trembling fingers, Danielle opened the article. The byline showed it was published just 17 minutes ago on Ellis's personal blog, a platform dormant for over a year until this moment. The post began simply, Last week, during the worst blizzard this city has seen in decades, I found myself at my lowest point. Stripped of pretense, of power, of the artificial constructs that had defined my existence, I wandered the frozen streets considering an exit strategy from a life that had lost its meaning. Then a nameless woman at a powerless cafe showed me a glimpse of authentic humanity that reignited my purpose. Danielle's breath caught. The post continued, describing in painful detail the writer's spiral into depression following his company's scandal, his crisis of conscience, his decision to walk away from everything. That night of the storm, he recounted being caught unprepared in the blizzard, his car breaking down, his phone dying, and then finding warmth and unexpected kindness in an unlikely place. He never mentioned Fairview Coffee by name. Never mentioned her name. But the details were unmistakable. The thermos of tea with honey, the last muffin freely given, the simple words that had apparently pierced through his despair. Then most people need to do better. The post ended with an announcement. Ellis was launching a $40 million initiative focused on community support and affordable housing, inspired by a moment of genuine connection that reminded me why any of this matters. I don't know her name, he wrote, but I know her spirit. And it's that spirit I hope to honor with this work. Danielle set her phone down as if it were suddenly burning hot. Her chest felt tight. This was real. This was happening. The stranger really had been Grayson Ellis, and now her simple act of basic human decency was being mythologized across the internet. The cafe door chimed. Tori entered, her expression a storm cloud ready to unleash lightning. Behind her filed the rest of the staff, each face bearing a different mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and barely concealed excitement. Tori slapped a printed copy of Ellis's blog post onto the counter. Care to explain this? I didn't know, Danielle said quietly. I still don't really understand. Don't play innocent, Tori snapped. You expect us to believe that Grayson Ellis, the Grayson Ellis, just happened to wander into our cafe during the blizzard, and you just happened to help him without recognizing one of the most famous tech billionaires in the country? He had ice in his beard and looked half dead, Danielle replied. I wasn't exactly checking LinkedIn profiles. A few staff members snickered, which only darkened Tori's expression further. This is obviously some kind of publicity stunt, Tori continued. You knew exactly who he was. You two cooked this up together. Danielle was about to protest when the bell above the door chimed again. The entire staff turned as one to see Eliza Winters, the journalist from Philanthropy Times, enter with a photographer in tow. Ms. Brooks? She called out, spotting Danielle. I was hoping to catch you before opening. The story's breaking across all platforms, and we'd love to get your perspective as the woman behind Ellis's transformation. Before Danielle could respond, the door chimed yet again. This time, it was Christina Walsh from the Tribune, followed by two more reporters Danielle didn't recognize. Ms. Brooks, is it true you had no idea who Grayson Ellis was when you helped him? One called out. How does it feel to be the inspiration for a multi-million-dollar initiative? Asked another. Did Ellis contact you personally after that night? The questions kept coming, reporters pressing closer, phones and cameras pointed in her direction. Tori stood frozen, her accusatory stance forgotten as she processed the reality unfolding before her. Danielle backed away from the counter, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. This wasn't what she wanted. Not the spotlight, not the questions, not the suspicious glances from coworkers or the hungry gaze of reporters sensing a story. I just gave him tea, she said, her voice nearly lost in the growing commotion. That's all. It wasn't special. It wasn't a strategy. It was just tea. The cafe door burst open again, this time revealing Vivian Chen from corporate, along with Denise Park and two security personnel in company uniforms. This is a private business establishment, Vivian announced firmly. Unless you're here to purchase coffee, I must ask you all to leave immediately. The reporters protested but began reluctantly moving toward the exit under the stern gaze of security. Danielle exhaled shakily, grateful for the intervention. But her relief was short-lived. As the last reporter was ushered out, The cafe window suddenly exploded with camera flashes. A sleek black car had pulled up outside, and emerging from it, clean-shaven, impeccably dressed, and instantly recognizable from every article she'd read last night, was Grayson Ellis himself. The cafe fell into shocked silence. Even Tori seemed momentarily robbed of speech. Ellis nodded to the security personnel who moved to intercept him, producing what must have been identification that made them step aside immediately. He entered the cafe with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. His gaze swept across the assembled staff before settling on Danielle. Recognition flickered in his eyes, not the confusion of their first meeting, but clear, focused awareness. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice carrying the polished tones of countless TED Talks and investor meetings. "I believe we've met before, though I was considerably less presentable at the time." Danielle stood paralyzed, the surreal quality of the moment rendering her temporarily speechless. How could this composed, authoritative figure be the same desperate man who had collapsed into her cafe during the blizzard? "Mr. Ellis," she managed finally. "You seem warmer now." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thanks to you." Behind her, Danielle could hear the collective intake of breath from her coworkers. The mysterious stranger, the billionaire, the story, all suddenly, undeniably real. And at the center of it all stood Danielle Brooks, who had only ever intended to give a cold man a cup of tea. The cafe fell silent as Grayson Ellis stepped toward Danielle. His transformation from desperate stranger to poised billionaire was jarring, the expensive suit replacing frost-crusted clothes, his once wild beard now cleanly shaved. "Ms. Brooks," he said with a nod. "Might we speak privately?" Before Danielle could answer, Tori swooped in, her smile professionally fixed. "Mr. Ellis, I'm Victoria Andrews, assistant manager. We'd be honored to arrange." "My business is with Ms. Brooks," Ellis interrupted politely but firmly. Danielle found her courage. "We can talk right here." Whatever he had to say, she'd prefer witnesses. Ellis studied her briefly, then nodded his understanding. They settled at a corner table, every eye in the cafe tracking their movement. Up close, Ellis looked both more and less than his media photos, sharper intelligence in his eyes, but also a lingering vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. "I owe you an apology for not identifying myself that night," he began. "You were half frozen," Danielle replied. "Not really introduction time. Still." He placed his hands deliberately on the table. "What you did, offering kindness to a stranger with no expectation of return, affected me deeply." Danielle shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't special, Mr. Ellis. Anyone would have done the same." "No," he countered with surprising intensity. "They wouldn't have. That's exactly the point." From her peripheral vision, Danielle noticed Vivian Chin whispering urgently to Denise Park. The corporate attention made her skin prickle. "Your blog post has caused quite a stir," she said carefully. "That was intentional." "And the initiative you mentioned?" Ellis nodded. "The Danielle Brooks Foundation. With your permission, of course." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Danielle felt her face flush. "That's really not necessary." "Perhaps not, but it's right. The foundation will focus on affordable housing, community support systems, and employment opportunities, starting in this neighborhood." The irony wasn't lost on Danielle, a woman who couldn't afford decent housing herself, suddenly the namesake of a multi-million-dollar housing initiative. "While I appreciate the sentiment," she said, choosing words carefully, "I'm just a barista who did what anyone should. I don't need recognition." "This isn't about recognition," Ellis replied. "It's about inspiration. About values worth preserving in a world increasingly lacking them." Something in his tone, echoing the desperation she'd glimpsed during the blizzard, made Danielle pause. This wasn't just a PR stunt. Something deeper was at work. "I should mention," Ellis continued, his voice shifting quality, "that during my time here that night, I overheard certain conversations." Danielle frowned, not following. "I was seated near the supply room," he explained. Where you were confronted about giving away company property. Across the room, Tori's sharp intake of breath was audible. Ellis turned slightly toward her. Ms. Andrews, was it? I believe you expressed concern about a muffin and hot water. His tone remained conversational but carried steel beneath. A muffin that would have been discarded, given to a man suffering from hypothermia. The color drained from Tori's face. I was simply following protocol, Mr. Ellis. Indeed. Ellis turned back to Danielle. I've also noticed the speculation about you since my post went live. The accusations? Danielle's stomach tightened. Had he somehow heard what Jamie and Marcos had said? The rumors Tori had spread? Corporate headquarters has been informed of certain management inconsistencies at this location. Ellis continued. An internal review is underway. Behind them, Denise Park straightened abruptly, her expression shifting from fascination to concern. That's not necessary, Danielle said quickly. She hadn't wanted any of this, not the spotlight, not retribution against her coworkers. It's already in motion, Ellis replied simply. But that's not why I'm here. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. This is for you. 2 options. Danielle opened it cautiously, finding a formal letter on Ellis Technologies' letterhead. Her eyes widened as she scanned it. A managing position here at Fairview, he explained. With full benefits, housing assistance, and significant salary increase. Or, if you prefer, a position on the Foundation's advisory board. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why all this for a cup of tea and a muffin? Ellis's expression softened imperceptibly. Because when I walked in here, I was a man who had lost his way. My company had violated public trust. My reputation was shattered. I'd spent the day considering endings rather than beginnings. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And you, without knowing who I was, showed me genuine human decency. Do you understand how rare that is? How valuable? The cafe remained utterly silent, absorbing the raw honesty in Ellis's voice. The choice is yours, he concluded, gesturing to the letter. Manager or advisor? Both start immediately. I'll need time to think, she finally said. Ellis nodded, unsurprised. Of course. Though I should mention. He glanced toward the windows where reporters still hovered. Your quiet life has likely changed regardless of your decision. Camera flashes punctuated his point, catching their conversation. The story was taking on a life of its own, the barista and the billionaire, connected by a blizzard and simple kindness becoming legend. 3 months after the blizzard that changed everything, Fairview Coffee hummed with an energy it had never known before. Gone were the flickering lights and temperamental heating system, replaced with state-of-the-art equipment and warm, inviting decor. The once struggling corner cafe had become the heart of a neighborhood in transformation. Danielle Brooks moved among the tables with the same quiet grace she'd always possessed, though now her movements carried the confidence of someone who had found her footing in an unexpected place. A small silver name tag announced what everyone in the city already knew. Danielle Brooks, owner-partner. She'd surprised everyone, including Ellis himself, with her decision. Rather than accepting either of his original offers, she had counter-proposed. She would remain at Fairview, not as a manager, but as an owner-partner under the umbrella of the new Danielle Brooks Foundation. The cafe would serve as the initiative's first community hub, a place that offered more than coffee, providing job training, evening classes on entrepreneurship, and resources for those seeking affordable housing options. Ms. Brooks, called a young woman, waving from a table near the window. I got the apartment. The one on Westfield Avenue. Danielle smiled, making her way over. Lydia Chin had been attending the cafe's financial literacy workshops for the past month, determined to qualify for one of the foundation's subsidized apartments. That's wonderful news, Danielle said, genuinely pleased. When do you move in? Next week, Lydia beamed. It's the first place I've had with actual, reliable heat. And I can afford it on my nursing assistant's salary. These were the moments that sustained Danielle through the whirlwind her life had become, seeing tangible changes in people's circumstances, not just their coffee orders. The bell above the door chimed, and a familiar figure entered. Tori Andrews, her once superior expression replaced with something more subdued, nodded a greeting. After the internal review Ellis had prompted, Tori had been offered a transfer to a different location. Instead, she'd requested to stay, accepting a demotion and a probationary period. To everyone's surprise, including Danielle's, Tori had proven herself willing to change, gradually earning back trust through consistent effort rather than sharp elbows. "The community college called," Tori said, handing Danielle a message slip. "They want to add another night class here. Small business accounting." "Tell them yes," Danielle replied. "We'll adjust the schedule." "Already done." Tori hesitated, then added, "The interview piece in the Business Journal came out today. It's really good, Danny." The article was the first in-depth interview Danielle had granted since her story exploded across national media. For weeks, she'd declined all requests, uncomfortable with the spotlight and the narrative being constructed around her, the humble black woman, discovered by a white billionaire. It had taken months of perspective and Ellis's steadfast respect for her boundaries before she felt ready to tell her story on her own terms. As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed with a text from Ellis. Their communication remained primarily professional, though tinged with the unique understanding of two people whose lives had intersected at their most vulnerable points. He was respecting her wish for independence, allowing her to build something that was truly hers, even if his resources made it possible. "Will Mr. Ellis be attending the anniversary event?" Tori asked, noticing the text. "He's trying to keep a low profile," Danielle replied. "Doesn't want to overshadow the community's accomplishments." The 3-month milestone celebration would mark not just the transformation of Fairview Coffee, but the completion of the first wave of housing units and job placements through the foundation. What had begun as a chance encounter in a blizzard had become a model for sustainable community development that business schools were already studying. Later that evening, after the last customer had left and the night class on entrepreneurship was wrapping up, Danielle found herself alone at the counter where it had all begun. She ran her hand along the surface, new, but deliberately placed in the same spot where she'd once made tea for a desperate stranger. The door opened quietly, and Grayson Ellis slipped in, looking far more like the man from the blizzard than the polished seal who had returned. Casual clothes, a day's stubble on his face, and none of the entourage that typically surrounded him. "You came," Danielle said, surprised. "I wanted to see it through your eyes," he replied, glancing around. "Not through quarterly reports." She understood. For all his resources and power, Ellis was still searching for something that spreadsheets couldn't quantify, the same authentic connection that had pierced through his despair that snowy night. "Coffee?" she offered with a small smile. "I was hoping for tea," he answered. "With honey. Not the fake stuff." Danielle laughed, the sound warm and genuine in the quiet cafe. "Coming right up." As she prepared the tea, Ellis wandered to the community bulletin board now covering one wall. It displayed photos of new apartment residents, job placement successes, and upcoming workshop schedules. At the center hung a simple framed quote. "Most people need to do better." "You kept it," Ellis noted. "It turned out to be true," Danielle replied, placing the steaming mug before him. "But so is its corollary. Most people will do better, given the chance." Outside, snow began to fall again, not the brutal storm of their first meeting, but gentle flakes drifting past the windows. The cafe, once cold and empty during storms, now glowed with warmth that reached beyond its walls into the community. "To second chances," Ellis said, raising his mug slightly. "And simple kindness," Danielle added, touching her mug to his. They sat in comfortable silence, two people from vastly different worlds, connected by a moment of humanity that had changed not just their lives but countless others. Fairview Coffee had become more than a symbol of one wealthy man's gratitude or one woman's compassion. It stood as a testament to the ripple effects of basic decency, spreading outward in ever-widening circles, transforming a community one cup of kindness at a time.